SC Media and our sponsors, Savient, Liminal, and CyberArk, are proud to present this month's CISO Stories program. Hosted by yours truly, Jessica Hoffman, this is the show where CISOs share tales from the trenches and unpack leadership lessons learned along the way. Find this month's CISO Stories content at CISOstoriespodcast.com. The Cyber Risk Collaborative is a unique membership community enabling cybersecurity leaders to work together in a trusted environment. To learn more, visit CISOstoriespodcast.com/CRC. Greetings, everyone. Welcome back for another week's episode of CISO Stories Podcast. You got me, yours truly, Jess Hoffman, as your host. And today we are joined with Sean Murphy all the way from Seattle. It's super early out there. Thank you so much for waking up to us, Sean. How are you doing today?
I'm very highly caffeinated and pleasure to be with you. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, of course. I guess that's like home of Starbucks, although nobody goes to Starbucks out there, right?
Yeah. No, they do. They do. There's one on every corner. And then along with all the other coffee shops too. You can, lots of caffeine out here.
Yes, I love Seattle. Beautiful city. So this month's theme is identity security. So thanks for joining us again. And you have a lot of experience within the CISO role and executive leadership. I believe you have a background in healthcare. Now you're in the financial industry as well. So that's two huge pillars of our world economy: healthcare and financial, highly regulated. Obviously very challenging when it comes to security, especially if we talked about like doctors, the challenges there with literally health and health, the challenges with healthcare, doctors, life or death situations. They don't even want to do multi-factor. Financial, nobody wants to, you can't mess with nobody's money. You'd be in big trouble. You mess up somebody's money. So let's talk about that a little bit, maybe from pulling from your experience. Love to hear more about your financial background, what it's been like for you switching from on-prem to cloud solutions, and how that has really changed your focus on how you're addressing identity and access management, security controls, and implementation.
Perfect. So I'll start with I for the last 6 years I've been the CISO at BECU, which is in Seattle. We're a credit union, fourth largest in the nation. We're a community-based credit union. So I say all that to say, during those 6 years, we have, much like many other organizations, made the shift from having principally all employees working within our brick and mortar facilities to, through the pandemic timeframe, and actually very rapidly changing out to almost 100% people working remotely from all points. And so as it relates to identity strategy, we had to very quickly move to more of a strategy around securing the identities and securing the individual computing platforms that people are accessing our information from. So in the interest of time, we did that through VPNing and some Citrix VDI kind of setups. But we made the commitment at that time to move on the zero trust journey, to move away from, heavy reliance on VPNs and very administratively burdened laptops and endpoints, to more of an adaptive authorization, more of a segmentation of our identity or workforce identities. And it's been a journey, but it started around the pandemic, and now we are, we're pretty much a organization that works remotely, and so we have to secure it that way. We don't. I think the term is identity is the new perimeter. Well, we still have a perimeter, of course, but we still have a protect, detect, respond, and recover responsibility there. But we have really shifted our focus to truly securing the identities of our workforce and
So can you
access
talk a
to
little
them.
bit about that? Like what, you don't have to go into like granular detail, but you mentioned zero trust. So can you walk us through maybe a little bit about that journey, implementing zero trust when it comes to identity and access management?
Well, and if to be fully transparent, we all know that it is a journey, and if I could indicate like where we are in that journey, it's somewhere at the relative beginning of that journey. We have a remote workforce. We're securing the endpoints. We're securing the access per individual. We're securing those credentials. What we're moving to is conditional access based access for the people in the organizations. We have certainly have multi-factor authentication in place for that remote access. And then one of the things that we're on the journey of doing is fully segmenting out what we call the workforce domain from our production environment. So in a client server architecture, we have found that the blast radius is just too much to have all of the endpoints be able to basically access the information. And I'm specifically speaking of like laptops, not necessarily servers and things like that in the production environment, but having that client be able to connect with each other, connect within the production environment to these systems without any kind of intermediary. Again, this kind of zero trust architecture to constantly verify adaptive authorization. We found that there's a real risk reduction in terms of creating that segmentation with our workforce access. So we're moving to that, and I think within the next year we'll have that fully segmented out, and really reducing the risk around ransomware and other types of malware getting into the system from one specific laptop, somebody clicking a link. It's not obviously it's not impossible, but it does reduce our risk quite a bit. But then we also have found, and this is kind of unrelated to the identity security piece of this, but we also have found through this model that employees have a better experience with their tools that they need to do their job, and that's been, I'll call it a happy byproduct, but we've definitely featured that as part of hey, what's in this for me? Why is this good? The employees are able to work better under the conditions of the zero trust architecture that we're putting in place.
One of our sponsors for this episode is Savient, a leading provider of identity security. Global enterprises rely on Savient's Identity Cloud for unparalleled visibility and control over every human and machine identity, so they can better secure their organization's business processes, enable digital operations, and empower everyone who works for them and with them with right time, right level access to the digital technologies and tools they need. Please visit CISOstoriespodcast.com/Savient to learn more and get a free demo. Interesting. Not you bribing your employees with zero trust. That's a new one. So you talked about remote access. How about internally, like bank tellers, folks that have to be on-prem? So how has identity and access management and identity security morphed since you've moved a lot of the workforce to remote? Has that impacted at all, or is it just business as usual? How has zero trust been implemented for those on-prem required positions?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we do have a number of positions and employees in the organization that will really never be able to work remotely because we have a very strong presence in our neighborhood financial centers, which is one of the strengths of the credit union that I work for, is that people really love coming into our neighborhood financial centers, meeting with the personnel that work there. We have a very high touch type of approach, along with a high tech approach. But so there's a number of people that will always work in those situations, and we have additionally moved those computing environments from being within the clients within the production environment to more of a virtual desktop interface. So we really robusted our Citrix platform to be able to have those people that are basically on-prem work much the same way as people who are working from their home. The job and the job requirements for people that work in the neighborhood financial centers is very different than maybe a developer, application developer. That's a I guess that's a big enough difference that I don't have to really illustrate that much more. But we set up the employees that are working as tellers and things like that a little bit differently. But we also have the zero trust model in there, but it's mostly through virtual desktop interfacing, so that they can't download data to their desktops, and they can't, all that is behind the perimeter, that access, even though they're working on prem, as you would say.
CyberArk is the global leader in identity security. Centered on intelligent privilege controls, CyberArk provides the most comprehensive security offering for any identity, human or machine, across business applications, distributed workforces, hybrid cloud environments, and throughout the DevOps lifecycle. The world's leading organizations trust CyberArk to help secure their most critical assets. Please visit CISOstoriespodcast.com/CyberArk to learn more about them.
Yeah, absolutely. I just had a vision of like those movies where two people turn the key for the nukes. I just, um, when it comes
Well,
to money, yeah,
it's similar with cash boxes.
yeah,
There's basically two-person carry kind of thing there too.
right. So, we get, sometimes I feel like we get caught up in a lot of the logical aspects of cybersecurity, which is obviously very important, but we do still have brick and mortar server closets, data centers on prem. There's always, I think most companies have some kind of hybrid, but there is still some hardware on prem. And so,
Yes.
working in myself, I work in a regulated space. So, that importance of the physical security aspect and identity security for those physical components, I don't think gets enough cred, because that is still super, super important. And that's why I asked that question too, because, obviously we need tellers, and I don't, I wouldn't ever want to go into a bank and have a robot necessarily. I love to go into my local credit union and see Nancy and how are you, how's it going, right? And so really appreciate that personal touch, that you had mentioned about that. So yeah, just working on that a little bit more, emphasizing that a little bit more from the security perspective, physical security. um how is it that you manage identity when it comes to the regulatory for on-prem? You mentioned the cache box, but there's obviously other very sensitive locations within your branch offices and so forth. And the people as well are very critical assets, not just your employees, but the customers. Can you talk a little bit about more about the identity management that you do there to make sure that people are physically safe?
Well, being fully transparent, that's an area that's under one of my peers, the physical security or facility security. Uh, I work with I work with that process more around our crisis management team. So if there's an event that involves the safety of people in the organization, then like I said, my peer is he runs point on badging, armed guards, things like that. From a cybersecurity perspective, I get involved mostly from areas of fraud, so not so much safety, but I get involved with a lot of fraud issues, everything from and this is kind of a physical aspect. We have people that come into the neighborhood financial centers. They spoof identities. Maybe they got those credentials from a social engineering type of attack, and so we get it. We definitely have controls in place from a process perspective. With how tellers interact with people and our security awareness and training program. It kind of at a very top level, the theme is, if something seems suspicious, report it. Don't be pressured to do the action because maybe the our member is, or they're probably not a member. The fraudster is really pushing on you and creating a sense of urgency that's not really there. And they do that in a face-to-face manner in a lot of ways, but it still brings cybersecurity to the table because access to the information, like stolen credentials, things like that, are areas where we have to dig in and see what access, if there's been any access or if there's been any infiltration and things like that. But I think that's about the extent of the cybersecurity area for physical security.
No, but yeah, no, that was great. And sorry, that was not one of our rehearsed questions. That's what I do, Sean. Fantastic. But yeah, just that somebody has to have a lot of balls to go inside, into a branch and say, hi, I'm Sam Estella, give me all
Yeah.
my money. That's pretty ballsy. Well, how about let's switch gears a little bit. So you spent some time in healthcare, now you're in financial, two huge industries, as mentioned before. How have you seen the different? What are the differences that you've seen between identity access management, identity security between those two industries? Are they similar? Do you think?
Well, like most everything, there's some similarities and there's some really significant differences. On one hand, the identity security within healthcare is super important. Relative to patient safety and patient care, because we want to make sure that the people who have access to your information or your medications and things like that are really legitimate users. There's a lot of data integrity issues that come with unauthorized access, data exfiltration. That's similar to within the banking industry. Obviously, we have a lot of concern with anybody having unauthorized access to data because it can be exfiltration of information. It can be, I go back to fraud within the banking industry. If somebody has access to our members' information and they're messing around in their accounts and withdrawing information and things like that, or withdrawing funds that the member did not intend. And then last but not least, the regulatory environment. So healthcare is highly regulated. Financial services are highly regulated. A lot of the regulation is around identity, and making sure that you have many controls, in place, like multi-factor authentication and least privilege, user access reviews, things like that. So they're very common there. The difference, I guess the most significant difference that I noticed is really in that area of fraud. I have come to learn a lot about financial crimes and fraud, not only from an external adversary, but the insider threat type of fraud access, or that they can either enable or they can actually commit themselves. As opposed to within healthcare, it was really more focused on privacy and compliance as far as a partner with cybersecurity. So in healthcare, I was very closely aligned with privacy and compliance and legal. And then within the banking industry, I've been very highly aligned with fraud, but then also, of course, legal and privacy and compliance as well. But that fraud aspect of the banking industry has been very prevalent and somewhat different than what I was used to in healthcare. Although there is healthcare fraud, before somebody, flames me on this podcast, but yeah, yes, there's healthcare fraud, but it's just a little bit different than what it is. At least the focus in banking.
Absolutely. Fraud, waste, and abuse. I believe that
Yes,
was one of President Obama's directives from a federal government perspective, reducing that. Um, when I worked there at CMS, seems like a long time ago, they had their heat, in Chicago and Vegas, I think, and, those hot areas for fraud. And absolutely, hands down, I think we can all agree. Um, uh, Compromised credentials, harvesting credentials, any way that the adversary can get in with usually non-privileged, and then escalate their privileges to being administrators and so forth. Like that's how they get in, right? There's no one
and
way.
that's interestingly enough, that's been true from almost the start of I guess just my own personal experience of getting into information security, that the hardest thing in our business is to identify the authorized user doing something unauthorized. So an adversary, external adversary, gains credentials. They become an insider. They become an internal user, and then whether they escalate privileges or they start moving around the network or they start actually just exfiltrating data with those valid credentials. It's a lot. I won't use the adjective. It's just different than if you are trying to protect and detect against external attackers that don't have authorized
Right.
credentials. So
Yeah, insider threat. You mentioned that a
that
little
is
earlier.
always that that's been the crown jewels, if you will, is to have
Mm-hmm.
the identity of somebody in the organization.
Mm-hmm.
One of my first meetings at BECU 6 years ago, I got up in front of the audience and I talked about how everybody wants to be you, because the adversaries would love to have your credentials. They would love to be you. They would love to have your access. So I really need you to be super vigilant about protecting your identities, protecting the information. And that's kind of the start of the security awareness and training platform, is to be, cognizant of that, and keep those secrets secret.
Absolutely. And especially the folks handling the money, but not just them, right?
Yeah.
Your developers, you,
Yep.
um, the greeters, all the folks that work within your organization, BECU, which stands for Boeing
Employees.
Employee Credit Union. Yes.
Correct.
So interesting history. I never knew this existed or Bowen was even started out there. Obviously, it's a huge federal contractor. Everybody knows about Bowen. They're still out there in private sector as well. So you said it's the fourth largest credit union in the nation, biggest community based. Um, and also, I really like that you were telling me that the bank really emphasizes helping folks build generational wealth. And so as a advocate for diversity, equity, and inclusion, that's awesome that your organization is taking those extra steps to really build that within your community. So kudos there. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, if you we walk the talk too. I mean, if you go to becu.org, and just peruse around, we're our field of membership is the state of Washington, people who work, live, worship in Washington. So not everybody can be a member of BECU, but not at least not today. Someday, maybe pretty
Okay.
soon. But the point of the story is that when I say we're a community-based, credit union, and that's as opposed to other credit unions that have membership based on your employment or some other affiliation, we have target populations in our communities that we really want to serve. And typically banks and maybe even other credit unions don't serve that population, because of credit risk or different things like that. So uh, we have policies and procedures in place. We have products that are really targeted at helping our community. First of all, financial health. And I talked about this, I think, in our prep. But the connection between healthcare as an industry and then this one specific credit union is we do have a component that we're very focused on maintaining financial health of our members, which means just like spiritual health and physical health and mental health, your financial health can really affect your total body being. And we really walk that talk. And so I've been very, very fortunate and privileged to be able to work in an organization that truly, what we say our mission is exactly what we do on a daily basis. It's not just words on a page.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Again, thank you for what you're doing. And what you just said there made me think about, and you also mentioned about these adversaries bring a false sense of urgency. So I can
Mhm.
only imagine that your help desk, your tellers, the folks on the ground probably do interact with folks that have legitimate urgencies. Like, why don't I have any money? Why didn't my check clear? Who made these withdrawals if they were a victim of fraud or identity theft? And having to really figure out the authenticity there, you're going to have super strong, I'd say, like operational controls and logical controls, but really to be able to authenticate these people is critical because you are providing a service, a needed service, a very high demand service. Like, don't mess with people's money. So I can only imagine some of the real world scenarios your folks go through when it comes to authenticating people in that time of urgency, which it probably most times is legitimate. So yeah, I see some challenges there, just not being in your industry, but it sounds like that can be very challenging.
We didn't talk about it, but we have a very robust, large call center that we support our membership. We have about 2.5 million members, or about 2 million members, and we get lots of phone calls every day, and so we're certainly working through all of the different innovations that there are with authentication, multi or omni channel, I think is the way they term it, but voice biometrics, things like that to help those individuals at the front line be able to quickly and in some ways frictionlessly, if that's a word, authenticate that somebody is really who they are when they call in versus a social engineering type of attack. And we get lots of those as well through the call centers, and of course our service desk has a little bit different process, but it's relative to making sure that an employee is an employee. They have procedures there as well.
Anytime I get annoyed because I have to do so many layers of authentication, that to me says it's working. So if you annoy me, you're doing a great job. I don't know what that says necessarily. I can get annoyed easily,
Well,
but you know what I
no,
mean.
it's no, it's part of kind of frame that up as there's a level of trust that we want to be able to instill into our our membership and certainly our employees. We want them to trust the organization that and that's a broad word, so there's a lot of different areas there to unpack. But really, it comes down to there's certain things people expect in this day and age. So when you are authenticating to your portal or a website for the first time, you do expect to have a challenge. You don't expect to have that challenge every time you move from one product to the next or another account to the next. But if you're doing something that you don't normally do, or there's the geographic thing where you're trying to log in from two geographically separated points, and the risk-based scoring, a conditional access mechanism says, hey, this is kind of risky, I'm going to prompt you for another multi-factor authentication, or I'm going to challenge you in this way, and then you have to pass that test. That level of friction, I think people expect, and yes, they might be annoyed. That's
But
okay.
they
But
appreciate it though.
yes, they
Yeah,
realize that there is some security in the background, and they trust us.
that's a great point. Again, don't mess with people's money. The extra layers. And Google, I've grown to appreciate Google's like multi factor. But yes, if we're talking about making sure my money's safe in the bank, I think most people would be like, yes, do all the layers. I'm with it.
That's another similarity with healthcare and financial services is people who are that are customers or members of those different types of industries. The last thing they need is to have to deal with identity theft, or their credit scores getting plummeted, or their insurance, and on the healthcare side, the medical insurance being fraudulently used. The reason I say that is because when they're coming to us for the services that we provide, we don't want to really disrupt their lives be responsible for disrupting their lives because we've had a data breach or we've had some sort of unauthorized use of their information. Because to unravel that, I mean, first of all, from a healthcare perspective, you're talking about somebody who's probably not feeling too well or in some kind of medical condition. Last thing
Right.
they need is to have to deal with unraveling the problems with their identity or their health insurance or something like that. Same thing on the financial side. Like you said, don't mess with people's money. People do not like to unravel the fraud and the getting new cards all the time, and it's a pain. So rather not put people through that.
Yes. We are at time, but I have like a million other questions. I just like, how are you securing us? This is all great stuff. Really it is. And I feel like financial industry has been one of on the forefront of identity security. I remember doing multi-factor with my bank long before it was really picked up by other websites, organizations, online services. So I appreciate that the financial industry has been taking this very seriously and continues to do so from what I'm hearing from you. And we have good folks like you helping to lead the charge. So thank you, Sean. So we got to wrap up, but I always like to ask my guests this question. So tell me, Sean Murphy, um, what would you tell your 18-year-old self? What advice would you give him?
Uh, well, I'll stick to relative to cybersecurity. I would tell my 18-year-old self do do the jobs or do the work that are now. I was gonna say do the work that is like pain points, within your organization, or if you're an entrepreneur, go to where the problems are, because I found myself moving into cybersecurity because it was a field that was really just starting to blossom, just starting to grow when I first started going into it. And it was almost the proverbial everybody else took two steps back, and there I stood on the line, like, okay, you go be the cybersecurity person. I'm so glad that happened. But my 18-year-old self, I would say, rush to that because it's amazing how rewarding the career is. It's amazing how much good you can do, and it's dynamic. It changes every day.
I haven't heard that one yet, but I totally agree.
Well, my
Yeah.
other my other answer my other answer would have been hit the weights more and practice my hitting a curveball a lot more because my 18-year-old self wanted to play baseball.
Nice. Haven't heard that one either. Um,
Well, as you can tell, I don't play baseball, so I didn't hit the weights and I didn't hit the curveball.
oh, well, you're here with us now, so
Yes,
everything happens for a reason.
I believe that.
Yes, yes, and thank you. And you were here for a reason. So somebody listening got some good tidbits and takeaways from this. Thank you so much, Sean. It's been a pleasure having you on and getting to know
Thanks,
you. Might
Jess.
have to do part two and maybe
Anytime.
talk a little bit more about like web online banking and stuff. Because again, we're not messing with people's money. So anybody out there that needs to pay their employees, pay your employees. Don't be messing with people's money. Okay. When we talk about critical services in any organization, the payroll system is very critical. So remember that. That should be on your top critical system.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, Sean. Thanks so much again. It's been great. And thanks to all our listeners. We'll see you again next time. Until then, take care.
Thanks, Jess.
Thank you for tuning in for this week's episode of the CISO Stories podcast. We want to say a special thank you to our sponsors, Savient, Liminal, and CyberArk. Please subscribe to the CISO Stories podcast and you will receive a new story each Tuesday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. We'll see you next week for a new episode.